I would like to welcome you to our public meeting on rail seating. By way of introduction, for those who don't know me, my name is Jay McKenna. It's great to have so many people here. We have a panel of speakers who I'll introduce shortly. They will be putting forward some comments and views themselves, and then we will open that up to the audience to ask questions, make comments themselves, make their feelings known, and also hopefully find it somewhat informative and educational. I'm sure I will too. It is a very sensitive and emotive subject. This is the culmination of a lot of work that we at Spirit of Shankly have put in. I want to explain the process that we've been through and then explain what will happen next, and then I'll pass it over to our speakers. Last summer, we'd took a decision as a management committee to go to our annual meeting and ask people if we should have a conversation about rail seating. Not whether it should be introduced at Liverpool, not even whether it should be introduced at that time, but whether people wanted us to talk about it. We were very aware it was an emotive issue at the time. We did, though, feel it was the right thing to do, and I personally feel a very brave one from the union to do. The reason for that is the conversation was happening nationally. For years, football supporters, some on this table, have talked about safe standing and rail seating. They've called for it to be introduced at their football clubs. But in recent years, we've seen that more football clubs, more supporters groups have moved this forward. They've talked about introducing it at their clubs. They've asked their own fans. Shrewsbury have recently announced they plan to introduce it. But I think most people will know of Celtic's introduction of rail seating. We felt that if we didn't start to have this conversation with our members and supporters, the conversation would happen around us, and that could be upsetting for some, but also could be damaging so that the views weren't heard. We felt that wouldn't be acceptable. But also as an organisation, we were repeatedly, by our own supporters and other football supporter groups, being asked what our opinion was. We felt we needed to have an opinion, and the outcome of this will determine Spirit of Shankly's position on rail seating. But it's been important for us to engage as many supporters as possible so that they can have their say and that we can get an understanding of where at least a significant number of Liverpool supporters are on this issue. Back in September, we did have our meeting, and we have throughout regularly kept both the Hillsborough Family Support Group and the Hillsborough Justice Campaign updated of our progress. We've regularly put updates on our website and social media. We've provided an opportunity, we feel, for everybody to have a say, as much or as little as they want to. That now does reach this public meeting, and we do know people will share their feelings and thoughts that can be deeply emotive, personal, and I would ask that everybody in the audience is sensitive to that. You don't have to agree, but you don't have to fall out and be disrespectful. We have to at least understand why each other thinks the way they do, so that we can at least make an informed decision. So what this means, we will, after this meeting, publish a vote to our members on our website and to the wider support for as many people as possible to take part to get their view on whether rail seating should be introduced. This is the most significant question. This will be the question that's asked directly to Spirit of Shankly members, but will be the first question in a series of seven, put to supporters. And it says, on the introduction of rail seating areas in football stadiums, are you in favour of them being introduced? Against them being introduced? I don't know enough about them, I want to know more about them, or undecided. That will set our policy position. This doesn't mean we will ask Liverpool Football Club to introduce a rail seating area. It doesn't mean we will campaign for their introduction or oppose them. It doesn't mean we will do anything next. What it means is this is our position. Any conversation about what we do next is an entirely separate process. As we've learned from the conversations we've had, particularly in midweek, with families and survivors and those who were at Hillsborough, there are very pertinent questions on all sides of the debate that need answering. There needs to be a conversation about what it would look like and how, if it was to be introduced, or if it was to not be introduced. We need to at least take on board all views so that we can determine any next steps. That will follow the vote. As you will see, you'll be asked questions about your attendance at football matches. We do feel it's important that we know if people are actually attending matches and how regularly they attend them, and how that shapes their view. Same for away matches. We will be asking people whether they do prefer to sit or stand at football matches. That's one of the things that has come up. People who do sit currently but would like to stand. People who stand but would like to sit but are made to, for example, because the cop is standing, certainly for 6 or 7 of the games a season, but the back of the cop regularly. And given the choice whether you would use it. Now all of those will be live from this afternoon on a link which we will send out via our social media channels, and people will have until next Friday evening to vote on that, as will our members. On Monday the 31st of July, we will announce the results of that. But again, I just want to remind people it doesn't mean that any next steps will automatically follow. Families, survivors, people on both sides of the debate will need time to digest them. We as a union will need time to digest them and have conversations with people about what that means. I do just want to say to people though, earlier this week we did have a meeting with families, survivors and those who were at Hillsborough. There's been some publicity about that. It isn't for us to get into a he said, she said on this. Some of those people who spoke at that meeting are here and may well make their feelings known. I have a whole raft of comments that people have asked me to read out, and everybody will be afforded the opportunity at this meeting, if they wish to do so, to make their feelings known. Liverpool, as some people may well have seen, put out some comments earlier this week. Tony Barrett, the new head of supporter liaison and club engagement and supporter engagement at Liverpool, made his comments known. I'm just going to get them now and read them out to people so that people can know what the club have said on this and what their current position is. I think it's very important we don't see this as a win or a victory for anybody. Nobody wins or loses in this debate. It is just simply about knowing how people feel, and I think the club's comments reflect that. I'm just going to read out the comments then from Tony Barrett. So Liverpool have now spoken in detail about the current debate for the first time and said they will listen to the views of their supporters while continuing to stress the current legal requirements of all seater stadia. They placed on record their thanks to fans who've waited until a suitable juncture in the ongoing Hillsborough proceedings before entering into any debate. Whilst we respect both the campaign and support the principle of a considered reasonable debate, it should be stressed that current legislation requires the stadia of all Premier League clubs to be all-seater, a situation which we continue to comply with. Furthermore, the tragic events of April 15, 1989 means we and our supporters are in a uniquely complex and difficult position as far as the current debate is concerned, and we would appeal to all fans to continue to be respectful of the Hillsborough families and take their views into account during whatever deliberations take place. Unless and until there is a change in legislation, all debate will remain hypothetical. But as ever, we will listen to the views of our fans and look to offer the best possible match-going experience in whatever form that may take. With that, I want to open up to our panellists to speak and introduce them first, and then they can make comments themselves. To my left is Amanda Jacks from the Football Supporters Federation, known to many for their work around football and policing. To my right is John Paul Taylor, who's the Supporter Liaison Officer at Celtic FC. And on the far end is Rick Ryden, who's an inspector with the Sports Ground Safety Authority. It's fair to say Rick is essentially the police of football stadiums. They write the Green Guide and they ensure that all football clubs comply with it. So there are a host of opinions to be heard from those, but importantly, that you, if you have any questions, take them down and we'll open it up after they've made contributions for you to do so. Amanda.
Thank you, Jay. The Football Supporters Federation represents tens of thousands of fans across England and Wales. For many years, we've led on the Safe Standing campaign, and we welcome the statement from Liverpool Football Club this week. In our many years of campaigning, we've heard many arguments from all the authorities and some clubs themselves against safe standing. In the very early days of our campaigning, the primary and main reason that we heard against safe standing areas was very simple: we can't have another Hillsborough. I think that those who said that underestimated the resolve and strength of the families and loved ones of those who died to uncover the truth and the real reasons for the loss of life at Hillsborough, and of course justice for them. Among other reasons given, we were also told that the simple act of moving your head and shoulders from side to side could render you liable to falling down. We heard that standing up would put off women and children from attending football matches. We heard about the perceived dangers of progressive crowd collapse. We were told that it mattered not that our counterparts in Germany stood very safely because they were somehow different to us here in the UK. We were told that the police objected to standing areas because fans couldn't be identified. However, the common denominator in all these arguments was that they were entirely evidence-free. They were based on nothing more than assumptions of what may or may not happen. We feel that in the modern world, such pivotal decisions that affect so many people should be based on strong evidence. And of course, we now have that evidence that standing can be managed safely. Of course, we have it in Europe, but we also have it a couple of 100 miles up the road in Glasgow. And of course, we'll hear more about that from JP shortly. It's also noteworthy that the Sports Ground Safety Authority have visited Celtic Park and couldn't find anything wrong with their arrangements for fans to stand there. I'd also ask you to consider that the debate around safe standing is one that is full of ironies. Our football stadiums, including Wembley, are increasingly multi-purpose. How can it be safe for the fans of music, rugby or boxing to stand in stadiums, but not their fellow football fans? If you visit every single football stadium in this country on a match day, you will find supporters standing up, sometimes numbering in their low hundreds, often in their thousands. Away fans will tell you that they will never sit down at their away fixtures. It's a further irony that legally, lower league stadiums may have standing areas, but not upper leagues. So why is it safe, say, for a Burton Albion fan to stand up, but not for a West Bromwich Albion fan? But I think the bigger picture and the biggest irony isn't really about standing. It's about ensuring fans who already stand and have done so since the introduction of all-seater stadiums can do so safely in a purpose-built environment. But perhaps more importantly than that, it is about choice. Survey after survey demonstrates that upwards of 85% of football supporters in this country, regardless of their personal preference, would like to be afforded the choice as to whether or not they sit or stand while supporting their teams. Surely in the year 2017, that isn't too much to ask. Thank you.
First of all, can I thank the Spirit of Shankly group for inviting us to speak on this forum. One of our key objectives at the Sports Ground Safety Authority is to have spectators have an honest and frank debate about this subject. We are really keen to engage with supporters to get their views, and certainly the views of Spirit of Shankly will be greatly appreciated. Before I start, I'm on this panel. I don't want to give you specifically my views. I'd rather take questions and answer questions that you may have on this subject. So what I would like to do is introduce my background, and you know at least where I'm coming from. I've been a building inspector for over 30 years. For the last 10 years I've worked at the Sports Ground Safety Authority. For those who don't know, we used to be the Football Licensing Authority. That's an organisation that was set up after Hillsborough to ensure that the local authorities were consistent in delivering the safety certificates and to write the standards really for safety. And as has already been mentioned, we write the Green Guide. I also sit on the British Standards Committee I chair the British Standards Committees for spectator facilities. And as part of that, we set the standards all over Europe, whether it be Germany, Belgium. So these products that are put in the rail seating, we actually write the standards. And we're currently writing a standard for rail seating, so that if they are going to be introduced in the UK, and they obviously look like they're going to be in Shrewsbury, then they will at least meet a safety standard. And currently there isn't one internationally. The third thing I'd like to say is just that the SGSA, as I've already said, are keen to have this debate, and we've been down to Celtic. We've had a look at how it's managed there. And as far as we're concerned, it is very well managed there. So, there's no question about certainly the management of these areas. The government still aren't convinced that a reintroduction to standing is necessary at this time. So what you discussed now will probably feed into feeding the government, because one thing we are the government's experts on crowd safety. The clubs I deal with, what I should have said at the beginning is, first and foremost, I'm a football supporter. Unfortunately, I support Preston North End, but we all have our cross to bear. But so I understand this debate. I understand it very well. I used to chair the safety advisory group at Blackpool for 10 years prior to my current job, and that was before when they had a standing section. The SGSA issue licenses for standing areas at Carlisle, Accrington, Morecambe, various clubs like that. So there isn't an issue about safe standing. The issue is whether there should be a reintroduction of standing in the top 2 divisions.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks firstly to Jay, Spirit of Shankly, for giving us the opportunity to come along today and just put the case forward. I can really only speak to you on the basis of practicalities and how rail seating has worked at Celtic. We've had a rail seating section at Celtic now for a year. This is moving into season 2. And the background to that really was that over a period of time, we had a group of fans who were insisting that they would stand at football. And I think that that's kind of fairly common up and down the country. As a consequence of that, the Safety Advisory Group at Glasgow City Council put some pressure on the club really to highlight the fact that it could have an impact on its overall safety certificate and the capacity for the stadium. So the club were obviously keen to find a solution which accommodated both the safety aspect and also the fans who were insisting that they would stand. It probably should be underlined from the outset is that the driver in all of this for Celtic was safety. It was always about safety, so it's not about commercialism or getting more fans in, because we work on a 1-to-1 ratio, so it's one standing place equivalent to one seat. So capacity-wise, there is no change, but we didn't lose the capacity. Having looked at a number of different options going across Europe, the club settled on rail seating as being the most, probably the most practical and the safest installation that we could probably find in terms of rail seating. We had an ongoing issue with the City Council for a number of years in terms of trying to get this through, but at the beginning of last season, we were granted the permission to go ahead and install a rail seating section, which we have now done. And as I say, we've had that in there for a season. We've got 3,000 fans. We manage it as season ticket holders only. We give the season ticket holders a clearly distinguishable season ticket pass, which is different from everyone else's, so that we can manage the numbers coming in and out of the section. It's in high demand, but over the course of last season, we didn't experience any issues at all relative to standing. It's been a fantastic success. It's helped generate and reinvigorate the atmosphere within the stadium. But as I say, most importantly, it's been extremely successful on the basis that there have been no reported issues as a result of fans standing at matches, and that section has been full for pretty much every game. We've had fans and clubs from other fans and employees from other clubs up and down the country, mostly from England, and from some big clubs who have been up and seen us on a match day, and they've been massively impressed by the rail seating section, the difference it makes to the atmosphere, but most importantly the fact that it is safe. It's a safe alternative, and it's certainly a lot safer to people who would insist that they would stand in a seated area. I think there's a slide you can see quite clearly, and we always felt that this was a very powerful slide. As you can see from the front section, that's a cross section of fans that are standing in seated areas. There is nothing, if there's a surge or anything happens within the match, there's nothing to protect them from going forward. As you can see with rail seats, you have a clear load-bearing rail which will prevent the person behind you coming in front of you, and the person in front of you, it will protect them if you surge forward. So no matter what happens, it's a safe environment for people standing watching football. We're very satisfied with it, and we would hope that it's something that we can build upon in future years. So, like Rick, I'm more than happy to take any questions that you might have about it, and hopefully help you form your opinion as to whether or not you'd like to see it at Anfield.
We, as Spirit of Shankly, have a seat on the ground safety advisory group locally, and liaise regularly with the City Council and partners who are on that, including Merseyside Police and others, to talk about supporter issues. And ahead of opening up this conversation back in September, we did tell the Ground Safety Advisory Group that we were looking to have this conversation and ask them for views and comments. They've been, quite surprisingly to us, less than forthcoming in sharing the responses, although we did receive 2 late this week, which I will read out now. The first is from Merseyside Police. First of all, thank you for the opportunity to contribute to the debate about the use of rail seating in stadiums. It is quite apparent that the layout, design, stewarding and facilities within football stadiums have led to a far safer environment for all who attend and work inside most grounds across the country. That said, it is important to remember that the responsibility for maintaining such standards are with the clubs themselves, overseen by the local authority through its licensing arrangements. In Merseyside, we support this arrangement via the Ground Safety Advisory Group and our working relationships with the respective clubs, and this is a significant step forward following Lord Justice Taylor's report. We are, of course, more than alive to the local sensitivities of this debate, and with this in mind, it is too early for us to provide an opinion on either side as to whether rail seating is now appropriate. We will continue to monitor the debate and keep an open mind until such time as necessary for the police to give a view. Similarly, one of the councillors who sits upon that, Lawrence Brown, the Green Party does not currently have a national position on the issue of rail seating, so we have considered the matter locally. It is our view that the wishes of Liverpool supporters should dominate any discussion and the decision on this matter, so it is good to know that you are considering the matter at a public meeting. We would certainly not oppose the introduction of rail seating on a trial or pilot basis if the majority of supporters in groups such as Spirit of Shankly agreed with the proposal. What we would not want to see, however, would be any compromise on safety. That would be a clear red line for us. We would also oppose any proposal which sought to introduce rail seating with the primary aim of increasing revenue. In conclusion, it is our view that the supporters should have a major say as to whether rail seating is introduced to LFC. The reasons for rail seating must be to give the fans an improved experience at matches, not to increase revenue or to do it in a way which compromises safety. Alongside, obviously, asking for their comments, we did have representatives from both the Hillsborough Justice Campaign and the Hillsborough Family Support Group speak at our meeting midweek. I know there are some people who are involved with the Hillsborough Justice Campaign here. I'm not aware of anybody who's from the Hillsborough Family Support Group committee here. If they are, they can make themselves known, but just to sort of make sure people understand where they are on this. The Hillsborough Family Support Group oppose the introduction of this, and they said that they recently had a vote amongst families, and the majority of the families who took part in that vote supported to continue the opposition to introducing any form of standing. The Hillsborough Justice Campaign have given us a statement which we can read out, which I will just find. The Hillsborough Justice Campaign does not hold a position on safe standing, as it feels that it is not within the remit of the campaign to dictate or influence football supporters as to their preference. Our remit has always been to campaign for truth and justice for the 96 and to support survivors. Nevertheless, this issue has been discussed over many years at meetings, and within the group there have always been opinions both for and against. It is also fair to say that over time some members have changed their views in favour of safe standing. We appreciate that our opinion is sought, but all we would add to our consistent statements is that we welcome open, fair and frank discussion on the subject and would expect safety to be at the heart of any discussions. That's from Kenny Derbyshire, the chair of the Hillsborough Justice Campaign. I do have a whole raft of comments people have sent in to me. I will contribute them throughout the debate. They are a range of opinions and questions people have asked and things and other comments people have put forward. But I would like now to hear from anybody within the audience who has any comments or questions to make.
I'd just like to ask John Paul, you know, before the rail seating got introduced, you said that since you've had them introduced, you've had no incidents of being reported of anyone getting hurt. Did you have any incidents prior to them being introduced, being reported to the club, with people standing up and injuring themselves when sort of like a goal's been scored or whatever bit of has happened, with people going over seats and injuring themselves?
Thanks for hosting this meeting again, and thanks to everyone on the panel as well, especially John Paul. I think it's been a very busy couple of days for him, so thanks for his attendance. I thought the meeting the other night, the closed meeting, I know other people weren't there, but I thought it was a very good meeting and emotive, but everyone got the points across and everyone was respected for doing so. I was at Hillsborough and my brother died at Hillsborough, but I'm talking now as a match goer now. I don't want to look back at the past. I'm talking about what's happening to us as supporters now in stadiums. And the fact that people are standing up. And I said the other night in the meeting, the greatest legacy that I think to those who died at Hillsborough and the survivors is for people to stand safely. That to me should be the greatest legacy of what we're talking about here. And rail seating, simple system, no forward movement onto the row in front. People can stand safely. That surely is to the betterment of all supporters, even the ones who want to sit down. I was just looking at the questions on the screen. I'm near 50 now. I probably don't want to be in it. I want that to be for a youth. I want the young ones to go in that rail seating section. It's too old for me. I'm too old for it now. But I just think overall rail seating is the way to go, and I hope we push for it.
Could you put the picture up again of the standing, the cross-section standing at Celtic Park, please? Basically, I think it is about safety. That's the overriding factor. And a lot of people in the room will know that in Eindhoven in 2006, in a very modern stadium with the Liverpool fans, when Steve Gerrard scored, I was at the front and there were 5 empty rows of seats in front of me in the upper tier. The crowd collapsed behind me and I went over 5 rows of seats into the wall at the front, fractured my skull and sternum. Fully recovered now, thank you, but spent a lot of time in a coma in Holland. So when I look at that cross-section there, I would like to see it go even further forward and not just have those barriers along the road for people who want to stand, but for right round the stadium, for the simple reason that I've seen people falling towards over the front because you've got a projection of about 10 inches there, and it's a natural barrier to make you fall. In addition to that, I'll raise this subject. It's not meant to be a dig at anyone, but there are a lot of what are termed backpackers, people who are coming for the day, and those people bring backpacks with them and suitcases and everything else. They're let into the ground, and they've only got one place to put them, and that's in front of them on the seat. And if you're sitting in certain sections of the ground, people are not only trying to edge their way along the seat, along the row, but they're having to negotiate over obstructions in the way. And I've seen so many people falling forward and be grabbed and be stopped by falling by people in front of them. So in a nutshell, I'd like to see this extended so that it's in front of all seats for safety purposes.
It was just to pick up on the points that the guys made earlier. In respect to whether or not there were any reported hazards previously, there weren't, but the difficulty that the club faced was that the safety advisory group have got representation at every home game. They would have someone at the matches who could quite clearly see that the fans were standing en masse, and their opinion was that it was unsafe. So as a consequence of that, after each game, a report would go into the club which said, you have an unsafe area that you have to address. So that was the pressure that came on at the club, and whilst there was nothing reported, I think there was always the feeling that it was only a matter of time before something would occur, just particularly because of the particular group of fans were mostly younger guys that were very buoyant, very exuberant in their celebrations, and I think it was just felt that it was a matter of time. Obviously you'll be familiar as well in terms of corporate responsibility now as well, so when the board of directors have been informed that they would be liable for anything or any issues that might occur as a result of not addressing the standing issue, they felt that it was inherent upon them to actually find a solution which satisfied the safety authorities and also complied with their legal obligations as well. On the second part, in terms of Eindhoven, I had a similar experience at Ajax, where we went down 3 or 4 rows, and again it indicates the fact that if you're standing in seated areas without that level of protection, these things are likely to happen. And the last point was, you're never too old. I'm 52 and I'm in the standing section every week.
Yeah. Just with regard to the setting of standards, we're currently writing a new green guide actually, and we're taking on board this. It's called the clearway, that the passage in front of the seat, which gives you movement laterally along the gangway. That has been increasing, but if you go to old stadiums, you've got a really narrow gangway. But the guidance is for all sports now, and for things like cricket, where people bring picnic baskets, you do need a greater distance in front of you. But But if it is in an old stadium, then it's really critical that those areas are managed. So if people are bringing backpacks, it should be really for management to maybe put them away somewhere different. Have areas where you can take them and then collect them later. So it's a management issue, but unfortunately we can't rebuild every new stadium to new standards. If we could, it'd be excellent. But we do take on board all these issues about trip hazards and everything.
I've watched Liverpool since I was a 9-year-old, 1953. Right through to the 60s, 70s, 80s, till Hillsborough. I was stood in the cop. I was 6 foot, 15 stone when I was in my 20s. Stood in the cop, battered, pushed. Even to see a corner, they'd be knocked forward, just to see a fella kick a ball across the centre. And I'd sit in the house and I'd see an old movie, American movie, seeing a baseball game, something like that. They're all sitting down, families, man, woman, kids. Why the hell can't we do that? Then, as years went on, Match of the Day came on. I go to the ground, see them cameras there, all bloody made up. I'll be able to see the goals. I'll be able to see, was there a penalty or wasn't there a penalty? Now my question is, why do you want to stand? Just give me your answer now. Why you personally want to stand?
I am not having an opinion. We're asking everyone to put forward their views. We don't have an opinion. We're asking everyone to put forward their views. But I'm sure there will be contributions from people who will probably make their feelings. No, well, they will come back to that in a second. So you've clearly asked people why they want to do that. Absolutely. And we'll take some more contributions so people can share their views on that.
I had a couple of points really. The first one was going back to, I think there was a question to JP earlier on about the extent to which there were reported incidents at Celtic with people with injuries and things like that. I can say from my own experience that I suffered quite a bad knee injury at Blackburn a couple of seasons ago. I've had a couple of falls in the last 2 seasons at Anfield. I've never reported them to the club. They're not so bad that they would. I had a torn meniscus in my knee. I had to have treatment on my knee for 12 months, but I didn't report them to either football club. These injuries are happening a lot. The other thing I would say is I've stumbled or fallen when a goal's been scored, and I'm 6 foot. I'm over 17 stone. So when I fall on somebody, they may well sustain an injury as well. So I do think just because incidents aren't necessarily written in an accident book at a football club, it doesn't necessarily mean to say that they don't necessarily happen. And I think I would definitely be an advocate to say that I regularly participate in standing up at football matches, but it is a risky business and something that I enter into knowing the risks. And if there was an alternative that made the likelihood of me hurting myself or somebody else available, then I would gladly support it and gladly take it. I just had a question about the design actually at Celtic. And the design at Celtic, I understand, on a 1-to-1 ratio, so there was no additional capacity afforded from in that design. I wondered, is there maybe somebody on the panel could explain how it would differ and how it would be possible to achieve an increased capacity from something like rail seating, please?
Given that large groups of supporters from any team already choose to stand, what we're actually doing, those of us who do choose to stand at the moment, we are actually standing in an unsafe manner. Now, it is an emotive issue, and I'm respectful for the view from the other views for people who don't want this. But given that safety is paramount, and obviously choice as well, this appears to me, obviously I don't know what all the evidence is going to point to in a couple of years' time. This looks like a way of us going forward where we can actually have both choice and safety. And if you look at that slide there, if you're actually putting forward something now, the option there or the current model, I think that would be the one that would be going forward anyway. But the question to John Paul is that you've had this trial now, the pilot. What do you think, ratio-wise, is going to be your target to have rail seating, in percentage of seats in the ground?
I'll put these to the panel now, but just to say on that, there are a few things, and there are people who have contacted us separately and haven't necessarily made comments, but have said some things. Particularly on your point, one of the things that has come up in all of the conversations we've had with people, both privately and openly, has been choice, wanting to do that. And I know there's some people probably in the room who can talk about their experiences who did so the other day. The other bit around why do people stand, just to remind the audience, this isn't for me to sit here and say, this is my opinion. I'm the chair of Spirit of Shankly, and the outcome of this vote will determine our position. So I don't think it's right or proper that I put forward what I would or wouldn't do. I will have to take forward the view of our membership and supporters. Committee members may wish to do so, but one of the things that has come up, again in the conversations with people, obviously the Lord Justice Taylor report is often cited. Lord Justice Taylor also said supporters would get used to sitting down. And quite obviously, they haven't. And I think that's why we've started to have this debate, because that hasn't changed for a lot of people. So we think that's important. So open it up to the panel. I know Rick wants to come in and John Paul will on some, but obviously around capacity and choice.
First of all, I'd like to dispel or explain the issue around the numbers of people that can operate within this rail seating area. First of all, if you're retrofitting these rail seats, the dimension here doesn't really allow for 2 people, so you need to be over 800 distance, 800 mil, to certainly get 2 people to stand there. The issue though, if you add 2 people within that area, then the sight lines, so the person obviously behind couldn't see, or he'd be bobbing his head. So if you introduced a step there, and so that the sight lines, so you could see throughout, because what we really want is a good spectator experience for everyone. We don't want just a good spectator experience for the people that are stood behind on the flat. The other issue with this is that at the moment these are only loaded for one person behind. So if you start getting 2 people pushing behind it, then it can be engineered to be sufficient. But the final thing is, if you're retrofitting, 99.9% of stadiums now have a finite exit width, and they have finite concourse sizes. So they're designed for one seat, for the amount of space within the concourse to be one person for that seat, for the exit width to be one person for each seat, and certainly the management of it is for one person for each seat. So there's a few issues that you would have to do. You might have to widen your vomitories, increase your concourse size. So those are the issues. In Germany, they do have more than one. I think they have something like 1.8 people per seat. We won't be advocating that at the moment in this country because, again, we're setting the UK standards, and at the moment, everything is designed generally around one person. So that I hope that technically spells out that.
Just to reiterate on that, one of the points I kind of made earlier was that from our perspective at Celtic, it's all about one for one ratio. So we actually lost slight capacity because we did extend the passageways and vomitories, etc., to make sure that we were compliant. And also we put up a rail down each side as well, a 1 metre high rail, just to prevent kind of migration into the area for people that didn't have tickets. Just going back to the other question in terms of how big could it get, we've got a waiting list at Celtic for people who want to be into the standing section, into the rail seated area. As I say, at present it's at 3,000. I believe that the number of people on the waiting list is about 2,000, so that would take it up to 5. Everyone else in the stadium does pretty much sit, so it really only impacts on about just under 10% of the overall stadium capacity. But I think if we did get it up to 5, we'd be addressing, in terms of that issue of choice, we would be addressing it whereby we would give everybody who wants to stand the opportunity to stand, and the balance of people probably do just want to sit. So I think we'd give the best of both worlds.
Okay, I just want to come back on a couple of points there. You've said, JP, because these come up in midweek in discussions, and I know others have previously mentioned it. the loss of capacity, what was that? What, you know, how many seats did you lose? But also the migration. This is something that was talked about by some of the families the other night. The concern that more people would want to go in this area than should. And obviously, just so people are aware, that this was an issue once at Anfield, where the 300 blocks at the back of the Kop stand, and there were some issues where people wanted to try and go up there, even if their seat wasn't for there. But the club did, in liaison with the supporters who introduced it, managed to figure out a way to manage it, both self-policing and stewarding. So obviously any of your experiences on managing that, which maybe will answer some questions people had.
Sure. To prevent the migration, one of the things that we had to do was to comply with the application for safe standing, was we had to put rails down each side of the safe standing area, which meant there's a metre high railing that goes down. So that just prevents people walking across into the area. As I highlighted earlier, they've got a distinctive season card as well. We've got a dedicated stewarding plan, which means that it's different from the rest of the stadium, and that we've got increased resources within the rail-seated area, both at the vomitories and in the aisles as well, to try and prevent any kind of overcrowding or migration. Obviously, in sort of high-profile matches, it becomes a bit more difficult to manage that process. But overall, we've been generally satisfied that we've managed it very successfully. As I say, it is additional resource, and it's generally manpower that you require to make sure that you're keeping on top of it. But as I say, we've been satisfied, and the safety advisory group have been satisfied that we've managed it successfully over the course of last season. And if there are any adjustments or tweaks that need to be made, then we can quite easily do that with additional stewards this season.
And again, just a couple of other questions while we're on, obviously, your particular experience. Somebody who attended our meeting in midweek asked about this. Obviously, for those who know Celtic Park, but I'll give them a brief description. You have the rail seating section in one corner of the ground, and the away fans are in the other corner at the same end. And he was asking for a kind of comparison of, obviously, Celtic score, an Old Firm game, Celtic scored a last-minute winner, cue absolute pandemonium in that end. If Rangers were to score, I don't want to make you feel sad here. If Rangers were to score a last-minute winner, what's the contrast, I suppose, of the impact, of managing that safely, what it means for supporters, if there been incidents where people have been injured, or crowd issues where you've had to, it's been easy to manage in one or the other. What's your experience on that? And similarly, just also, it has come up, and I wouldn't want it to be, ignored, and the elephant in the room. Obviously, there was some stuff in midweek which has been referenced around the rail seating area and 900 seats, and I know Celtic put a statement out yesterday. If you want to comment on that as well.
Okay, so in terms of the experiences over the course of the season, so we had a number of high-profile games this season, not least the fact that the game against Rangers in September, when we won 5-1, as you can imagine. That was a great day for us anyway. But that day was massively exuberant in terms of the celebrations, and there was no issues within our side at all in terms of people standing and enjoying the match that particular day. Conversely, in March, we played Rangers at Celtic Park, and Rangers scored in the last minute, basically got an equaliser at the last minute. It's maybe unbelievable, but they did. And as a consequence of that, there was a surge towards the front with Rangers fans, and it was noticeably different. The fact that they were coming more to the front of the stadium or the terrace to celebrate the goal more than our fans would probably do as a consequence of the rails. So I would definitely say that it's definitely safer in the rail section than it would be in the non-rail section, if you like. Whether or not we would be able to do something within the visiting area where we could put rail seats in there, it has been discussed. Obviously there's a cost element attached to that, but it is something that we have discussed again to give visiting fans the choice when they're coming to Celtic Park. But as I say, from my own experience, and even the Man City game, the 3-each game, it was far safer being in the rail seats area for those types of matches. On the second part, I think that Jay touched on it yesterday. Yeah, there was some things that occurred during the week, which the club has decided that they're going to close part of it for a couple of games. But don't confuse this in terms of rail seats and safety. these are different sort of local issues that have kind of been rumbling on for a wee bit, and it's nothing to do with rail seats and rail seat safety. It's separate issues at the moment in terms of behaviour, and the club just felt that was a necessary action for them to take. But
so it's not the full thing being closed?
No, it's part of the area. The area holds 3,000. There'll be over 2,000 people at the game on Wednesday night who'll still be standing. It's just one particular section that the club were a bit unhappy with some of the behaviour that took place on Wednesday. So don't be confused in terms of the rail seating area wasn't safe. It's a totally separate issue.
I've got lots of contributions, but I'm conscious I've said a fair few. There's somebody, 1 second, notes, the gentleman there, I think Adam Kearns wants to say something. Just before anyone does make a contribution, I should have said this to people before. Obviously, we're live streaming this on our Facebook page, and there are media here, fan site and a few others. If you wouldn't want to be filmed making your contribution for various reasons, whether it's your job or emotive reasons and so on and so forth, do just let us know before you make your contribution. And I'm sure those in attendance will respect that and take that on board. So, gentleman there, Adam, and then Chris has got a question. I'll come to you.
I think it was about 6 or 7 years ago. I was initially opposed to the standing, and we got an invite to the standing car park to view the rail seating. And I think, if my memory's right, the seats were put up and down by using an Allen key, and were locked in position by stewards, etc., or back up again accordingly. And it changed my opinion, actually, seeing how sturdy and so on it was. And further to that, the gentleman over there who talked about falling 5 or 6 rows, I'm in the upper centenary, 5 rows from the front. And the same problem occurs there. On a regular occurrence, we get corners, so on. Everybody stands and there's pushing going forward. And it's a fair drop over the top if you happen to come to the end of that. So I can understand where he's coming from with the talking about barriers there. But the other thing is the gentleman's talking over here about going to away matches. There's a lot of the lads who go to the aways don't go to Anfield. And the reason a lot of them won't go is there's no atmosphere. And they prefer to stand. And they stand at the away matches. And if you go to an away match, you've got to stand. Because if you sit down, you're not going to see the game. And obviously, that has a bearing on the way I think. And why do you go to the game? Yeah, you want to see your team win, but even whatever age you are, you go because you get a buzz. And the buzz is being in the crowd and having an atmosphere. And part of the problem at the moment, to me, is the atmosphere at Anfield has gone dramatically less than it was 20, 30 years ago. And part of it, if you want to sit, fine, but I don't mind what we do. Stand or seat, it's a personal thing, but they should have a section there, in my opinion, which is dedicated to those who want to stand, like the gentleman's already said. But I'd also ask the gentleman about the seating, whether they still have that system where the seats are removable or not.
I think a few people have already touched on it, to be honest, Jay, and a lot of people are referring, Manda earlier on said, choice is the most important thing. Safety first, obviously, which has proven that it's a lot safer environment to actually stand. But it was just more in regards to the gentleman further over spoke earlier on saying, why would people want to do this? And he was referring to baseball games and people sitting down as families. There's going to be another 50,000 seats in Anfield where people can do that. People can sit down and choose to be with families. There's lads who we go with. We haven't sat down for 15 years, home and away. We don't sit down. Away games, you're standing up in the away sections, the back of the cop. So it's just about choice in terms of that. If you want to stand, you should be provided with the safest possible option to stand. It's something that all clubs should be doing. They should be providing fans the safest possible way to be standing. And as I say, if people do want to sit, they've got the vast majority of the rest of the ground to be sitting and enjoying the game in which they feel is best for them. There's a lot of fans who feel the way that they best enjoy it is to be standing, and it's something that the club should be providing, in my opinion.
It was something that I think Rick said when he visited Celtic, that it was being managed well. Now my question is more about what if it's mismanaged? I think it's always important that we know why Hillsborough happened, but we know there was gross negligence there, so if it wasn't being well managed at Celtic, are those fans still safe?
Anyone who wants to make a contribution? John Paul, you've been asked particularly about the lock seats, and I'll bring it.
So yeah, just on the lock seat question, yeah, it is. So the seats come down for UEFA games. When you play in UEFA tournament, you can't have standing, so the seats come down and then they're locked up for every domestic match, and that's the process that we operate at Celtic.
Yeah, just to be clear on that, they don't lock down, but they do lock up. So I suppose UEFA would want them to be locked down because it's their regulations that require it to be all seated, but they actually don't lock down, do they? But that's one specific product. You know, there is a few different manufacturers that do various types of seats, and I have seen a rail type or a multi-purpose seat that is just a fold-up seat. So there are other products on the market. Just with regard to your question about managing safely, it is a really key question, and we're really keen to observe the Celtic experience, simply to make sure that when we provide the guidance, because the guidance just isn't about the physical environment, the guidance is specifically around managing that safely. So we want to make sure that if a local authority is going to allow a rail seat to go in a stadium, that the management processes are in place to make sure that, you know, the UK is seen as the best at managing spectators throughout the world. So we want to maintain that management. So although we're issuing guidance on the technical specification, we're also issuing guidance to make sure that those areas are managed well.
I know Amanda's got some comments she wants to make as well.
Thanks, Jay. Stewarding is obviously critical, as it is in any football stadium. And JP, you said, didn't you, that your team are specially trained, and I'm sure as well the fans see the same stewards there week in, week out, so the relationship builds up. So you've got that dynamic there where fans are more likely to respond to stewards that they know and trust. I think there's obviously Celtic are under a huge amount of scrutiny, and after every match I'm sure you have to submit a report, and I'm very confident in saying that if standing areas are introduced in this country, there will be just as much scrutiny around stewarding, and there will be just as much emphasis on clubs to having properly qualified and trained stewards, not just any old Tom, Dick or Harry rocking up from an agency on a Saturday morning, but a dedicated team week in, week out. And I'm sure the SGSA would be instrumental in ensuring that happens. I think it's also, just digressing slightly, worth making a point to say that the Merseyside police didn't object. I think that's absolutely right that they didn't object. Of course, the police are entitled to their opinions, but how much influence they should have over football stadiums, I think, is probably a separate debate altogether. But the police aren't there in our stadiums to manage crowds anymore. The police are there to ensure that there's no crime and disorder and there aren't breaches of the peace. And increasingly we are seeing police pulling out of stadiums, particularly in London, and letting the football club manage the event safely, which again I think is how it should be. So I just really wanted to throw that into the debate as well.
Okay, I'm aware, no, one second, I'm aware there's quite a few others who want to come in as well, but we have had lots of submissions from people who couldn't be here, and I just want to read a couple of those. Just so that people can know what others have said on this. We've had a fair few from a number of families. The first one we had was from Sarah Williams. Sarah is the daughter of Anne Williams. Sorry I can't be there, but I'm away with my family on holiday. My mum Anne has always felt safe standing should be allowed at football matches, and so do I. I respect the opinion of those family members and survivors who may feel differently, but I think it is important everyone is allowed to have their say. We have known the truth about Hillsborough for years and years, and now the whole world does. It was not standing itself which killed our Kev and the 95 angels with him. It was a catalogue of serious failings by police, ambulance, the Football Association and many others. Rail seating is already being used safely and successfully in Germany and elsewhere. It is completely different from the cage pens of 1989 in virtually every single way. Every single fan has their own spec, which is about the same size as a seat now, but without as much plastic from the seat getting in the way, and their own personal space. I'd be happy to take my kids in there. In fact, I think they would love it. Since 1989, football has changed in many ways, some for the worse, including the fact that it is now so expensive and so much harder for kids to go to matches, which has had a negative impact on the atmosphere. It has also damaged the whole culture of football supporters, And it is only thanks to the determined efforts of supporters themselves that it's being kept alive as the game becomes more and more commercialised. The game of football and the clubs themselves have benefited by many billions of pounds from the passion the fans create, which they use to sell themselves around the world, and they owe it to these supporters to help preserve that culture. Lord Justice Taylor warned when he recommended all-seater stadiums after Hillsborough that fans should not be priced out, but that is exactly what has happened for many people. And sadly, people have died in all-seater stadiums around the world since 1989. We still rely on public authorities to do their jobs properly to keep us and our families safe. Going the match used to be passed on from generation to generation, but it's so hard for our kids to be able to go now, and I know that too many people would feel a game they loved has been taken away from them. I feel bringing back safe, affordable standing would at least be a step in the right direction. People are allowed to stand at all kinds of sport and music events these days. They can even have a drink at many of them, because the kind of proper safety procedures that should have been in place at Hillsborough are now commonplace. To me, it makes no sense for football still to be the exception when it comes to standing up at public events. I know this will be a very emotional subject for many families and survivors, and again, I respect the views of those who feel differently, but I think it's very important we are all allowed to say how we feel about this. I also think it's very important Liverpool FC, football organisers, and the government all realise they have a responsibility to listen to the views and families of all of the 96. Sue Roberts, who's the secretary for the Hillsborough Family Support Group, sent something in. I am one of the majority of Hillsborough Family Support Group family members who are against any form of standing, and the latest vote on this was only taken a few weeks ago at a family meeting. My brother Graham was one of the 96 unlawfully killed in the crushing in the pens at Hillsborough on the 15th of April 1989. The cause of death was given as compression asphyxia. We all know there were many factors that contributed to the deaths of our loved ones, but had Graham been seated instead of standing, this could not have happened. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I think any form of standing is a step in the wrong direction. I stood on the cop a few times as a teenager, and I can honestly say I never saw a goal being scored. I was more occupied with trying to remain upright. I think people have short memories about how bad it was back in the 1980s. I know things have been changed from the old terraces and pens to those new rail seat proposals, but if you have a tall person stood in front of a child or a smaller adult, then they will always have reduced visibility of the game. Rail seating will allow rapid sideways movements, which could result in crushing at either end of a row. Standing also allows a faster exit from a ground, and this must be taken into account too. Let us not forget what happened at Ibrox. Both internal and external stairs at the new main stand all have movements in one direction. The external stairs of the Santini stand appear to be much safer, with a series of stairs and landing than more stairs travel in the opposite direction. It is not just the usual access and egress that should be considered when engineers calculate the crowd movement impact. They must also take into account people exiting from a standing area in the event of an emergency evacuation or a bomb threat situation, and the extra people pressure rushing and impact on both the ground's internal and external staircases. There are real risks, and I sadly think a football stadium could become the target of an extremist group. Standing may also make it a little easier for the small minority of troublemakers to cause problems by setting off flares, etc. In my opinion, it would be easier to pinpoint and evict or arrest a seated fan than a standing fan. I don't agree that standing improves the atmosphere. In my opinion, standing is at best uncomfortable, and many fans are forced to stand against their will because the fans in front of them refuse to sit down. Persistent standing in seated areas is unlawful and should be addressed by our club. I accept everyone stands to celebrate a goal or give a player an ovation, but I think they should then sit down again and be respectful of those around them. I believe Spirit of Shankly should be finding out what the real issues are, and in my opinion, the main issue is friends and family members, parents and the children, etc., not being able to get tickets so they can all sit together. If this is a main issue, then why is it that this is what you should be working for with the club to try to address? Perhaps the reason this doesn't get mentioned is that it doesn't fit with the strong masculine stroke macho image of the majority of football fans. I mean no offence by this. With this in mind, I have a few questions for you. How many of you have actually tried rail seating? Do you stand at your ticket allocated location, or do you stand wherever you want? If the latter, does this lead to heavily populated areas along the rows? Do you take children with you? If children or shorter adults stand, have they been able to see all of the match? I'm sure there are football fans who are against standing who haven't yet voiced their opinions against the plans for rail seating, and this may be for a number of reasons. I just hope these quiet fans, many of whom were at Hillsborough, feel able to give their opinions at your meetings and without any animosity being shown towards them. Please can I ask that you keep me updated with what happens. Many thanks, Sue Roberts. Clearly they're two very different views, and there's lots of things that are within them, and I know there's more people who want to speak in the audience, but I'm conscious there's a couple of things I think that are presented from that are comments maybe some of the panel want to make. So I'll come to the panel and then open that back up to the floor.
Yeah, first of all, I'll ask Celtic. At the moment, you don't allow children in those areas, do you? Do you have an age group, an age limit? Yeah, so children have to be accompanied. So there is an issue here with young people being able to see in this product, and there's also an issue of diversity. So it's not really favourable for wheelchair users, for instance. So and we want to encourage family groups to come together. So there are issues around the having a cross-sectional demographic for spectators within these areas. So that aside, we haven't got the solutions for that. This tends to be specific for, you're right, a specific age group and a specific type of fans that want to stand. But if we can set standards for them standing safely and manage safely, then the customer care issues around the club need to be addressed as well.
Yep, so just a couple of points on those from me. In terms of our rail seated area, we do have quite a number of family groups. Kids can come along as long as they're accompanied by an adult, but we do have quite a lot of experience of family groups attending within the rail seating area without any issues. Equally, just on the point of in the rows, we actually have a high level of compliance as well in terms of people going to their appropriate block row and seat number. So when you get your place allocated to you for your rail seated area, it's just the same as like getting your match day ticket. So like, for example, my own is 111 BB 32, and that's where I go every game, and it's always the same people round about. So again, just like when going to match any other week, you're familiar with all the people round about you. We've got a whole family that are in front of us at the match, and we do experience high levels of compliance. So it's not really something that we have experienced.
Thank you. The compliance, I think, is really important, because I remember you were speaking at another event and you were very clear that supporters themselves were consulted throughout. It wasn't just, right, chaps and girls, here's your standing area, go and sit in it. There was full dialogue and full construction. So therefore, when supporters are treated as meaningful, sorry to lapse into management speak, but stakeholders of the game, they are far more likely to respond to requests for good behaviour and compliance, as JP has indicated. With regard to the diversity argument, I'm not quite sure where that's come from, but it is an argument that we've heard over the years. As a woman, obviously, I don't like to be told that I don't want to stand up because I have different anatomy to Jay or anyone else. It's just insulting in 2017 that diversity is brought in, and even if you're not a woman or if you're a different colour, different sexuality, different religion, you don't want to stand up. I think we need to stop saying that unless there is firm evidence that unless you're a young white male, you don't want to you want to stand up at the game. I think we really do need to knock this diversity argument on the head, or provide proper firm evidence that supports it.
Sorry, when I was talking about diversity, I was talking about wheelchair users. These sections aren't very accommodating for wheelchair users. That's what I was trying to say.
I'm aware these.
Yeah, I won't labour the point, but there's plenty of ambulant disabled people who find it very comfortable to stand, and in fact prefer to stand up because it suits them better physically.
We are asking a couple of equality questions around age and gender and stuff like that, because what has happened is we've seen this come up as part of the debate. So we think, and I think what's happened is supporter groups have took it upon themselves to actually try and find the evidence. And I know I would, without any sides on the debate, I would point people in the direction of the Arsenal Supporters Trust in their survey, because that shows there's a very diverse range of people who would like to see the return of or the introduction of rail seating. Other speakers, I've got Damien at the back and Becky and Josh here.
This is uniquely complicated for us. I'd like to congratulate Spirit of Shankly for the way you've timed the meetings. And as Stevie Wright said before, the meeting on Tuesday was excellent, and I welcome the debate. I like the idea that we're having a say, because the debate is happening around us. I've took the knock, to be honest with you, with the Premier League, just asking the 20 clubs what their opinion is. I think we should be full frontal and central about the debate here. We live with the consequences of what happened at Hillsborough, and as such, we've got a level of expertise about things, but also I think we need to be treated respectfully. And the likes of Sue Roberts' questions before from the family support group, they're very pertinent questions, very pertinent points. And I think that those who are against rail seating deserve a real detailed study from us if we're going to go along the line of introducing rail seating. In '89, I continued to stand, and I was happy with the defences were removed. And I was one of the lads who was singing "No Seats." But over time, you know, a good point again by Stevie as well. I'm getting towards my 50th birthday. I'm looking at something that might be something that wouldn't suit me personally, but I'm thinking about our support as a whole. I'm all ears. I think rail seating. I think the guests that you've got are ideal. But I think just because it works in Glasgow for 3,000 people, just because it works in Germany, that they're brilliant examples for data gathering. But I think what we need to do as for our community is, and I hope that the vote going forward is not a result no and not a result yeah, but it's that we go on to make a real, you know, let's have a delegation from the Spirit of Shankly or any other supporters of Liverpool to go to Glasgow. Let's go to Dortmund. Let's see it all. You know, the Football Supporters Federation, the ground safety people there. They've all made good cases. Is there any chance of putting that diagram up on the screen from before about the difference between the seats and the rail seats, if you don't mind? A question I've got from someone who had to escape to the front through gate 4 onto the pitch at Hillsborough. You know, a question for me, just for example, would be, that looks great, that's winning me there, but what an obvious thing that leaps out to me is, if in an emergency I had to escape onto the pitch, would those rails impede or delay your escape onto the pitch in the event of a catastrophe? So questions like that are very pertinent and should be answered, because cases being made very well, and like I say, I'm all ears, but I think that there are other questions about, it may be that rail seating suits one ground, but not another because of the layout outside the ground and the build-up and whatever. And going back to what I'm saying before about us being in a uniquely complex position here, you know, the Prime Minister in 2012 gave a double apology to us, and we more than deserved that. And if the spirit of that apology is meant, you know, for the double injustice, you know, we should be sensitively treated here. I'm sitting next to Paul. Paul and myself, we're both cop season ticket holders. We've been all over Europe watching Liverpool. Paul's in favour of the rail seating. Paul's mum isn't. Paul deserves to be heard. So does Linda. You know, and people's anxiety, we've already suffered enough anxiety over the whole subject. So those fears and worries need to be allayed. And so I hope really, and this is a great step in the right direction. If anyone's confident about rail seating, then it's great news if we do a detailed study, because it'll be shown to be the right thing. And if anyone's worried about the rail seating, a detailed study is also welcome, because it will then prove that it's not as safe as all-seater. And if rail seating isn't as safe as all-seater, even by 1%, given the number of millions of games that's played around the world. I mean, we're in a pivotal position here in Liverpool. If we say yes to rail seating, the rest of the country is just going to come right behind us and say, well, if it's all right for the Hillsborough survivors and the Hillsborough families, then we'll all do it. And then in 20 years' time, 30 years' time, 40 years' time, something happens wrong based on a template that we agreed to. That's a dangerous position to be in. So for purposes of us all being happy, all sides, those who are for and against, I think we need a real detailed study. And that's the question I've got for JP. You know, I'll go to Celtic at least once a season myself, you know, great friends that we are. Like I say, what are your comments there about those rails? If I had to escape onto the pitch, would that impede me?
I find the comments about the reintroduction of standing, that it would deter women and ethnic minorities, quite frankly insulting. I've been standing on the terraces since the mid-1980s with my mum and with my younger brother. And I've seen many women and I've seen many ethnic minorities from many different clubs stand on many different terraces. I do think safety is our absolute paramount concern, and I would like to draw attention to some of my experiences in the last season. I've not been to many Liverpool games since the mid-90s, and I'll explain why in a minute. But I came back last season, and we're already standing on the Kop. We're already standing at away games. And to be honest with you, I love standing. And the reason I love standing is because it creates a unique atmosphere within a football stadium that has been missing, I think, since the introduction of all-seater stadium. And atmosphere is a part and parcel of why football supporters love going to a match. Now, I've stood on the Kop for the European Games in the season before, and I also stood in the main stand, sat in the main stand last season. And what I noticed was on the upper tier, on the third tier, when I stood up to celebrate a goal, I almost went over the seats in front of me, and that was quite a scary experience for me. I actually had to put my hands up in front of me and hold on to the seat in front to stop myself from going over. So I think that's quite worrying, really, when you think that's a new stand that's been built in the aftermath of all this safety regulation after Hillsborough. I say all of this as a Hillsborough family. I lost my mum in the disaster, and I almost lost my brother. And if I'd been able to get a ticket there, I'm sure I wouldn't be here today. I would very much like to echo what Sarah Williams has said. I think she's got it absolutely spot on in this debate. I think that the reason I would like to see safe, and I emphasise the word safe, standing reintroduced, is actually, people have been talking a lot about backpackers. Now, I am a bit of a backpacker myself, but I'm not a day tripper. I'd like to reclaim the game. I'd like to reclaim the game for all of those people that were going in the 50s, in the 60s, in the 70s, and the 80s, who have now found themselves priced out of that very game that they love. And that includes myself, because of the introduction of all-seater stadium. And I say it's a bitter irony that I have been excluded from the game that I love because of a consequence of my mother's death. The all-seater stadium was brought in, and basically it was accelerated because it was already being talked about before Hillsborough happened. So in the late 1980s, more and more clubs and stadiums were moving to the all-seater model. Why was that? That was because the government, the establishment, realised that football was a great money spinner, wanted to commodify and marketise the game. In order to do that, you had to exclude the working classes and regenerate it and bring in the middle classes. That is exactly what all-seater stadia has done. And I would like to see the working class game return back into the hands of the working classes. And I think that safe standing is a mechanism to do this. As I said on Tuesday, we're already standing. It's now time to make it safe.
My name's Sue Hadley. I'm a totally blind fan for go to all home games. I've listened to all the comments, and I'm trying to imagine what the rail seating is like in my mind from when I could see, but I obviously can't. So I came to this debate today in a firm voice that I wasn't in favour of standing at the games. I've had to fight to sit in the Kop in the first place, because when I first started going to the games, as a blind person, I was told I'd have to sit in the paddock. I don't want to be told where I want to sit. I want to sit where I want to sit, and I want to sit in the Kop for the atmosphere, which is what everyone is on about. I am changing my mind about the seating, stand seating. I'd like to see it first, so physically myself, to be able to make a proper opinion. I am also a backpacker, but mainly because I have to carry a radio with me and maybe a flask, because it's obviously not easy for me to go out at half time for drinks. I would also like, along with the lady from the Hillsborough family that lost a mum, like to know whether that would be safe if there was a crush and for people to get onto the pitch out of the way. I've stood at the back of the cop with everyone else singing when I've managed to get seats up there. I'm quite happy to stand up there. The other thing is, you say about the families and children, that's another reason why I'd like to know about the thing properly, because my sister that comes to the games with me, unfortunately she isn't here today, she's a lot shorter than me, she's 4'10", so she's not much taller than the child with her children that go. If she was there, would she be able to see above the people? But my aspect is, I'd like to actually come along to maybe Celtic and have a look at the seating before I could make an opinion.
I'll pass that over to the others. One thing I wanted to make clear, we were hoping at some point to have tried to arrange a possible visit. We were just slightly aware that it might be seen in one way or other to influence the debate. I think all of those are raised a very valid points, and just to come back on something Damien said around sort of a detailed study on wanting to know more about it. We did originally, the question was going to be asked about whether people are in favour, against, or are undecided, and based on the things Damien said on Tuesday very eloquently, and he's repeated them there, we've added that additional option into the vote to say to people that if you don't know enough about it or want to know more about it, if you don't have an opinion one way or another, you can make that clear in the vote, and we can take that forward. I'll pass over to JP and Rick and stuff like that.
Just going back to some of the points that were highlighted there, in terms of coming up to Celtic Park, I would just like to extend an invite for anyone that wants to come, if you want to coordinate it through Jay, and we'll do it through Spirit of Shankly. We've already had members of Liverpool Supporters Trust at games, and we've also had members of Anfield Rap as well, who have been hugely enthusiastic about what they found at Celtic Park. But there's an invite there for yourselves to come along. As I say, if you do it through Jay and Spirit of Shankly, we'll have you up either for a match or just on an occasion where you can come up and see it for yourself and get a look and feel for the place, and maybe get a better understanding of what rail seats actually are. Going back to the point in terms of being able to access the pitch if necessary, the rails, as you would imagine, we're subject to rigorous testing before we get our safety certificate. So that means fire, ambulance, rescue, all of those people, all the blue light services have to make sure that they're satisfied that the egress is no worse than it would be if it was seats in place. From personal experience, the rail seats themselves don't represent any greater a hazard than it would be if you were trying to climb over the seats in front of you. It's almost impossible to go over those seats, and in terms of the rail seating, the egress more than satisfies the blue light services to allow us to get our safety certificate. Of course.
Just on that, what I can say is that I said it at the beginning, the government aren't satisfied that now is the time for a return to rail seating, and they will make sure that that every I's dotted and every T's crossed to make sure that all the fears are relayed. So at this moment in time, this debate is purely academic, because it would take a change in legislation, and it would probably take a brave government minister to reintroduce it, because at the moment, obviously, there has been some quite highlighted disasters that, you know, I would think the government are quite risk averse at the moment. So it is academic. But just to go back on that, we wouldn't expect people in a seated area to jump over seats to get onto the pitch. Evacuations, quite rightly, are controlled nowadays, and they're exercised. So before a certificate's issued, rightly so at Celtic, the Safety Advisory Group made sure that all those evacuations were exercised and people could get onto the pitch in a specific time to make sure that everybody within those areas were safe. So, you know, in the UK, the government aren't going to reintroduce it unless they're really satisfied. And there's probably been a few more pilots than just the one at Celtic.
Thanks for that. We, dependent on obviously any outcome of a vote, we would facilitate a visit there, and having spoken to Amanda, the FSF would absolutely support us in that. You know, we would be involved. I probably expect a deluge of emails from people tomorrow saying, if we go, can we go to watch Rangers or something like that? So, you know, this isn't like a wish list, but we will absolutely do it. I think it's very important. Points raised by Damien to actually see and experience it, and obviously from Sue as well about what that would mean for disabled people. And I think again, that comes into any next steps. You know, absolutely, if we were to say this should be introduced, or people to ask for it to be introduced at Anfield, you know, we as a supporters group would be at the forefront of ensuring everybody has rights of access to that, and that's everybody is involved in those discussions. But you know, one of the big things there from people is around experience it, and we will do our utmost to arrange that if appropriate, dependent upon the outcome. I know there's a few others, and I will come to you as well. I'm just conscious that there are lots of people who stand stuff in which I haven't got close to reading out yet, and I'm also aware of the time. A comment here from Louise Brooks. Dear all, my name is Louise Brooks. I'm the sister of Andrew Mark Brooks, who died at Hillsborough. I feel very passionate about rail seating. I fully support and would welcome areas of standing backward in football stadiums. This may come as a surprise to many of you, that a bereaved sister of a Hillsborough victim would want standing back. However, it shouldn't. Why would I not want it? Standing did not kill my brother or the other 95 victims. There were many other factors, but it certainly wasn't due to them standing. If standing kills, then why don't people get crushed to death every year at Glastonbury and at music festivals or concerts? They stand, they even dance, jump up and down, sit on each other's shoulders and have a good time, but they don't get crushed to death. R96 were used as an excuse by Thatcher and the FA to not only rid the terraces of football hooligans, but also to financially line the pockets of ex-employees. Lou says to everyone that they should research PEL Stadium seating and look at how this was introduced at the time. You will all soon realise that all-seater stadiums had absolutely nothing to do with fan safety. I absolutely refuse to allow my brother or the other 95 victims to be used as an excuse. If those pens and fences at the front had not been erected, they would have been able to access onto the pitch, which is obviously something that's being discussed now. It's about managing things safely. Football has ruled my life. When you're brought up in a football mad house, you have to like it. There was no escaping it. Our dad was a massive Birmingham City fan and a referee. Andy was obviously a massive Liverpool fan, a season ticket holder who followed the Reds all over Europe. When final score was on, there was murder in our house with my dad, if I so much as breathed. Both my dad and Andy lived for football. It ruled the Brooks household. Andy took me to Anfield many times. Ironically, he would sit me on a crush barrier, and him and his mates would hold onto the back of my coat like I was some kind of ventriloquist dummy. And I would, under strict instruction from Andy, you go with the crowd. If they go to the right, you move to the right. If they go to the left, forwards or backwards, that's the direction you go into. So if people doubt that I don't have any experience of standing, I can assure you I do. People have said to me that it's an insult to R96 wanting rail seating. How is it? What is insulting, though, is being used as an excuse to financially line the pockets of others. The atmosphere has certainly gone in the COP and many other football grounds. I don't want R96 or us families blamed for preventing you from all enjoying yourselves. I want you to have a ball when you go and watch your team play. If I felt that standing wasn't safe, believe me, I'd be the first one to say and prevent it. I wouldn't wish that our beautiful 96 went through that day on any other family, or to go through the 28 years of hell as we families have gone through and can still continue to go through. When people say that standing is dangerous and it contributes to the deaths, that is escaping the real reasons of what happened. It had absolutely nothing to do with standing. Common sense tells you that. If football fans want to stand, they should have the choice. I would like to see areas of both rail seating and fixed seating in all football stadiums. I want every football fan to be safe and happy and to come away from watching the team play having enjoyed every single minute of the game. That's what our 96 would want too. I know Andy would be absolutely livid if he knew fans aren't enjoying themselves fully due to his death being used as an excuse. A comment here from Paul Dunderdale. Paul was with Sue Roberts' brother in the pens at Hillsborough. As a survivor at Pen 3, my views before and after Hillsborough are completely different. Many times over the preceding years, I thought that crowded, uncomfortable terraces were the norm. That's how it always was. I lost my best friend in Pen 3, Graham Roberts, and had I not been lifted up to the main stand with my brother Andy, I'm convinced I would have lost him too. I firmly believe that going back to any form of standing is a huge mistake, and even if other clubs vote for it, Liverpool should stay firm and vote against its reintroduction. One of the legacies of Hillsborough is safer stadiums with good views and access. In my view, we sully the memory of our loved ones if we even consider standing on football grounds. Comments from David Hughes. James, my father Eric George Hughes died at Hillsborough. I'm a member of the Hillsborough Family Support Group. I'm well aware of the group's position on safe standing, but I'd like to express my personal opinion to you. Without being there at the meeting and listening to what some members of the HFSG said and others, it's hard to respond to the feelings of others in the room. Needless to say though, I'm 100% behind rail seating and feel this issue needs to be resolved by fans and families together. We're in a difficult situation at Liverpool because of what happened to our loved ones, but I know that my father loved to stand at football, and those feelings are being passed down to me and even now my daughters. I know that safety is paramount when people attend sporting events, but with modern technology and research, I'm confident such disasters wouldn't happen again. Part of going to watch football, especially on the Cop, is atmosphere. When crowds stand and people become passionate, it creates a special atmosphere that doesn't happen anywhere else. It's currently being stifled by people having to stay seated. I believe rail seating is safe and could be brought into part of the Cop as a small section as a trial first. I know that all of my friends and family that attend football are in favour of this. Just read one others for the minute. James, I've read your article on safe standing and noticed that there was a meeting for survivors and loved ones who were at Hillsborough. I'd love to have been there to share my thoughts. I just hope you can take my thoughts into consideration. I'm a survivor of Hillsborough, and I'm the boy being passed over the wall by the fans. You might have seen this on TV footage. I grew up watching Liverpool on the Cop, so I know what the current Anfield is missing out on, but of course safety must come first. On safe standing, it comes down to what it says on the tin, and it is safe, then for me, we need it in every stadium or ground in the country. I understand with safe standing that if your ticket corresponds to your allocated safe standing area, nothing like standing on the terraces and the dangers that went with it. I believe that safe standing is even safer than seating, because when you stand in a seated area and sing, you tend to lean forward, and I've had to put my hand on the person in front at times to help with balance. But the rail, there's no need, because you have your own space and your own bar in front and behind. And that's why I believe safe standing should be introduced back into football. If I thought for 1 minute that this wasn't the case, believe me, I would vote against. Anyone against the idea is in fear of a repeat of Hillsborough, but I think anyone who has reservations needs to go and see how it works for themselves before voting against it. I truly believe safe standing is a brilliant idea. It's safe, cheap, and adds to the atmosphere of a game. I hope you can share my input and hope people get a chance to listen to my opinions. I'm open up, I've got quite a few others, but I'm aware there's others in the audience.
Yeah, my name's Gareth O'Leary. I was in Pen 3 at Hillsborough, season ticket holder. I was at the meeting on Tuesday. The first thing I want to say is in answer to the most recent comment, which is about the government, and I would put more trust in the views of someone like Damien and many people who I stood on that terrace with and went through that with, and their views on the future of support in this country than any member of a government at the moment. So let's just make that clear. This debate is not, as far as I'm concerned, going to be led by government. It's going to be led by supporters. It's already been stated, I think, here today and the other day that the paramount concern of everybody is safety. But then the secondary concern is putting football back in the hands of people who love the game, not the people who administer the game or who make money out of the game. just in answer to the gentleman behind me who mentioned, you know, why would people want to stand? We know that people want to stand. It's not going to be everybody. And I just think the debate around standing needs to not be so binary that we imagine that we're all going to be forced to stand. That's clearly not the case, as it was even when we had terraces. It's a choice. And I think we need to give people that choice. There were many, many other points I want to make, but I'm going to hand it over at that point. But just, as we said on Tuesday, this debate should be led by this club, and it should be led by the supporters who go to the game, who experience the game, and who experienced how it was when we had standing, which was unsafe as it was found to be because it was managed in an unsafe way.
I'm just wondering, given the emphasis at Anfield on the atmosphere at these particular games, is there any indication that the European bodies would be willing to listen to the opinion of supporters in the future?
Carl from the Anfield Rep. It's a question for Amanda. This is obviously a very emotional issue for this club, and everything that's decided in this room and every conversation is based on what happened in '89. I was just wondering how other clubs are looking at it, what their conversations are like, because they're not touched by what we went through back then, to see if it's any different to, you know, are they looking at it from a perspective, as Becky said, of, you know, putting the game back in our hands, or is it any other different criteria?
Just to say on that regarding, I can't speak for other clubs, and Amanda can touch on that, we do know, we've been contacted by several supporter groups in the past, as I say, to express an opinion, and lots of them have contacted us to praise us on having this debate and the way it's being managed. They are having conversations and they have talked about it openly, and we've been at meetings of the Premier League where the Premier League have been asked by supporter groups to ask the Department for Culture, Media and Sport whether it can actually be introduced, because there's a suggestion that it wouldn't actually require a change of legislation. And that it can be within the power, it can be within the power of the minister. So there's a conversation happening with supporter groups already, and I know Dave spoke to the club, but Amanda might be able to touch more on that.
Thanks, Carl. The English Football League are very supportive of safe standing and have been quite vociferous on the subject for some time now. A few weeks back, the Premier League went out to consult via a survey all clubs under their jurisdiction. We've already touched on Shrewsbury having rail seating areas installed. Cardiff City have a standing area within seats in their stadium, which is formalised and done in conjunction with the local council. Many more clubs will have de facto standing areas called atmosphere areas. I think clubs are, I can't speak for clubs, but the feeling that I've had over the years of doing this is that obviously clubs are very mindful of what happened at Hillsborough and are as respectful as they possibly feasibly can be under the circumstances. And you know, nobody is going to be cold-hearted and deliberate enough to go out of their way to deliberately insult the Hillsborough families and victims. But I think ultimately they've also got to be mindful of their own customer bases, their own supporters, and as far as they possibly can under the present legislation and the ground regulations adhere to their wishes. Hence, as I said, you know, we do have standing areas in a lot of stadiums, but they are called singing sections as a euphemism. So I hope that answers to a point. Thanks.
Yeah, just on the UEFA thing, I'm not aware that they are of a mind to change at the moment. As far as I'm aware, they're still keen to ensure that UEFA games are played on the basis of all-seated stadia, so I don't think there's any movement on that at the moment. I've certainly not been made aware of any change or any forthcoming change.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any groundswell from UEFA or FIFA to change their regulations, but there are a couple of organisations that you might want to engage with. There's the Football Supporters Europe and Supporters Direct, who both have the ear, and I think they're even financed partly by UEFA. So if you want an answer to that question, I suppose you could get that through the Spirit of Shankly and their engagement with those bodies.
Yeah, just to add, I am aware there was a recent fans European event where they were meeting with UEFA, and I do know that this was on the agenda, but we haven't had any update about what they've said on that. I do know that Michel Platini, when he was the president of UEFA, was firmly opposed, but the suggestion that they would certainly be open to having a conversation about it. But we will get an update on that for people.
So just to give you a wee update, there was a there was an SLO meeting with supporters direct in Gelsenkirchen last month. I was supposed to go to, but I couldn't attend. But I've just been sent the notes and the minutes from the meeting. So again, through Jay, I'll come back to you with any kind of feedback that there was from the rail seating project. So if it was covered as part of that meeting, I'll have the details for it. So I'll update you.
Thanks a lot. I'll read a couple more out and then again take a couple more questions and come back to that because there's some things that have come up as themes that I don't think have been talked about properly at the minute. This is for me and Donnelly, who was in Pentre, Hillsborough, was fortunate to not be injured and to get out. He got a few particular questions he's put forward around control and access to the stadium. So you mentioned before, obviously having different colour season ticket cards, I think, but also maybe how you manage that outside of the ground and what's in place to prevent any crowding issues and so on and so forth. There's other points around safety when a goal goes in. We talked about, obviously, with the Old Firm game. But it's something that's come up and other people have mentioned it. And he specifically asked us, obviously, during the last few years of the standing COP, it was noticeable around where vocal fans were standing. How much weight does the atmosphere side of the argument actually carry? Obviously, as somebody who's introduced it, he thinks it will improve the atmosphere, but will it last? He's not quite sure. Colin Granger, who submitted some comments, he read Gareth Roberts' blog on his visit to Celtic, Gareth from the Anfield Rap. He was a COP season ticket holder in the early 90s. He stood at every game, didn't ever believe it was an issue. The point he'd like to make is that standing at the match wasn't the problem, unsafe standing was. And Hillsborough was the epitome of unsafe standing, with terraces split into pens. And believes that whilst we should show understanding and fully respect the thoughts of Hillsborough families, there should be a place now for safe standing in England. Technology plus health and safety that in the world in which we live means that this is probably safer now than even having a seat. Anyone knows if you have a seat in the COP, you'll end up standing for half the match anyway, and it can be a problem for people. So let's do it properly. One other comment we got from Gary Duncan. He's a Hillsborough survivor. He went through the police gate the first time they were opened and went straight down Tunnel C to the B section, which he had a ticket. He made the greatest decision of his life when he saw how packed it was becoming and went back up the tunnel because there were no stewards to stop him. He went to the side of that with his 9 friends, and in the previous year he'd actually seen how packed it was. Regarding standing at football matches, his opinion is that it was the lack of organisation and not terracing that caused the disaster. May I remind you that I stood on the COP for 5 seasons, post 1989 and before seats were introduced in 1994. And he was never in any danger in attending any of those games. The COPs never generated the same atmosphere during games than it once did. And he's obviously seen footage of Celtic games and games abroad and having attended games. He thinks rail seating should be introduced like Celtic have done on a trial basis, and he'd love to try them out. So I'll open up for other comments, but bring you back in a minute on that atmosphere point. So anybody else?
One of the points earlier was about have you been abroad to Germany? I've been many, many times. One of the places is Mönchengladbach, and they have a terrace similar to Everton, which is like lower terrace and then upper stand. The lower terrace looks like it's one long terrace. It is divided into about 8 pens with fences about as high as this chair. At the front is a massive gate, which is quite easy to get on the pitch. It is absolutely superb. Last season I went to three different games, Hamburg, FC Union Berlin and Cologne. The atmosphere is something else compared to here. And the other point I want to say is about the COP now. The reason why most people stand is because it's so badly designed. I think whoever got the safety certificate at the time must have been someone in the mind of Sammy Lee, because most people can't see in there because it's so badly with the steps. I think the new one, how's it going to be with the new seats in the top corner? I don't know whether Rick can answer that with the size of the ingress with the steps and that, compared to the new main stand, the way that is built. The COP is badly designed, which makes people stand.
I think from a personal point of view, I'm very much in favour of seeing stadiums have a facility of rail seating. I think the debate needs to be opened up a little bit more, though, in that the issue for many people has been problems that they have experienced at away games. I think the tendency is to focus on your own ground, as say at Celtic, but I think it's just as important, and it would be an interesting question, is for those people who do go to the games, whether they would like the facility for safe rail seating at away grounds as well. Because it strikes me that's the situation where a problem is most likely to occur. I don't know, for anybody to say they went to Villarreal last year, the year before last, there is no backs to the seats in front, and the position is even worse than is shown on a stadium which has low seats. At some European grounds, there's maybe 2 inches, and really that is an accident waiting to happen. So in summary, I think the debate, for those people who go to the games, I'd like to know who would be in favour of rail seating for some of the spectators that go to away games.
It's just comment really, because me and my wife talk about a lot of things, and football is one of those things. But you talk about players, you talk about the club, etc. But when it came to safe standing, she wouldn't come back to you with anything half decent and just shut up. And she had a very firm view: we don't go there. And in some ways, she might have linked that towards the Hillsborough tragedy. But we went away to Dortmund, and we watched the match there. And afterwards, we're walking out, and she said that was fabulous. That she was talking about how safe it was. Then we played Dortmund at home on a cop, and after that, what do you think then, love? In comparison, and she goes, much, much safer. Safer to stand with rail seating than stand in the cop.
Maybe particularly, obviously, atmospheres come up a couple of times, and obviously any of the comments people have made.
So just on a couple of the points in terms of external, as well as different colour cards, we have got a card access system. I'm pretty sure Liverpool have got a card access system as well. So in terms of what turnstiles you would use, your card will only work in the turnstiles that you're meant to enter in. So I'm sure you're familiar with that process anyway. So that helps in terms of regulating it into the correct areas. In terms of atmosphere, the atmosphere has really changed quite dramatically. A few years ago, Celtic Park was, like a lot of other grounds in the UK, very, very quiet, not much going on. But that has been completely reinvigorated with the introduction of safe standing. And a big part of that is obviously the fact that it's been coordinated by one specific fan group, and the fact that they are intent in creating colour and noise and just really helping generating a fantastic atmosphere at Celtic Park. And I think that, again, from a Liverpool perspective or any other club, I think if you've got that there, where you've got fans that are willing to do that, then you'll quite easily generate a fantastic atmosphere. So I think that's definitely, that's been one of the improvements at Celtic Park. And our stadium manager, Robin Buchanan, won Fan Experience of the Year last season for the atmosphere at Celtic Park. But I think a big part of that has to go to the fans in that particular section as well, because they help create the atmosphere. And the last point in terms of Borussia Mönchengladbach, I was there last year, and it's a fantastic stadium as well. I think we could all learn from it.
Yeah, you're right about the German regulations say that well, anything over 2,000 has to be put into pens, which I wouldn't necessarily agree with, but they have problems with migrating into all one specific area, and it can be overcrowding. So in that respect, but they are well managed, I must admit, in Germany, but that's a specific regulation for Germany. The other question, was it that the viewing quality at the back of the Kop is so poor that it invites people to stand? Is that what you're saying?
All over the Kop.
All over the Kop. When the Kop was built, the viewing standard was something called a C60. It is now C90. So it's, in other words, it's a third better. So future stadiums, that won't happen. But that is a big issue, actually, of why some people persistently stand, because there are stadiums that have converted the old standing terrace into a seating terrace, and there's different standards of viewing. C values for those areas, and so across the country, unfortunately, there are areas that people tend to stand up simply because the viewing is that bad.
So there's 2 new blocks. Sorry to talk like this, but there's 2 new blocks getting built in the Kop in either corner.
On the corners, the local authority is supposed to look at those and make sure that they're not sold if there's restrictive viewing or large restrictive viewing. And now I don't know if that's the case. The ones in the corners of the new Kop. At the back, yeah.
I know there's a few others who want to come in. I'm just going to read again a few more comments people have submitted. Philip Cummins, hello, I've been in standing areas in Germany. I did not see many women, and I definitely did not see any youngsters. These standing areas were behind the goal. If our fans were offered the back of the Centenary stand, they wouldn't want it. They'll want a prominent area to be in. Glasgow Celtic is my second team, but just because Glasgow Celtic FC is not Liverpool FC, because they have standing, it does not mean we have to have it. In fact, if every club in the country has standing, it does not mean we have to have it. I don't believe in it, and I don't like it, and we'll be voting against standing. Andy Proudfoot has emailed us some comments, because some of these are just comments people have sent in to us to express their view, people who couldn't be here. He said he'd go with whatever the Hillsborough Family Support Group say, and it should be their choice. Another person, Jasper Gill, has emailed us in, I don't see how we can not consider the suitability of rail seating before we accept or reject it. It must be safer than standing on plastic seats and safer than the old fully open terraces. One of the things John Paul mentioned specifically was obviously supporters who were responsible in some way for atmosphere. I don't think they want to speak. I think they want me to read out the contribution from Spine Cop 1906. Is that right? Yeah, the person who doesn't want to say it's nodding to me. Spine Cop 1906, probably the closest thing you'd probably say we've got to the Green Brigade, people responsible for the predominant amount of flags and banners. Probably one of the last vestiges of keeping some kind of atmosphere within the COP. There are two main reasons why we as a group are in favour, and this is them speaking, should I say, why we as a group are in favour of changing the current model to a rail seating model. These are safety and choice. Safety. Allowing supporters to support their team in a safe environment is of the utmost importance. It's more important than the results, more important than a good atmosphere, and more important than any other factor whilst attending a football match. One of the most thrilling and enjoyable aspects of attending a football match is celebrating an important or late goal. Many supporters will have felt the physical impact of such celebrations. Under the current seated model, it's entirely possible during a celebration to lose balance, fall either forwards or backwards over plastic seats, potentially injure yourself or those next to you. Many of you will be familiar with football stadiums where seating is steep, and there's a real risk of fans being injured by others falling from behind. Additionally, even if you do not fall forwards or backwards, it's entirely possible to cause injury by banging knees, shins and other body parts against the seats, either in front or behind. A rail seating model, such as that implemented at Celtic, is designed to prevent this from happening. There is a bar in front of each seat, which prevents the supporter from falling forwards. Additionally, the seat behind is fully folded up to prevent any injury if moving backwards. A concern that has been aired when debating rail seating is the ratio of people to seats. This figure can vary depending on the model used. However, Celtic currently use a model of 1 for 1, so one person for every seat. This means that each supporter has the same amount of room as they would have in a seated area. Choice. A large number of Liverpool supporters, given the option, prefer to stand at football matches. This may be down to comfort, atmosphere, or indeed personal choice. There are also a large number of supporters who, given the option, would prefer to sit down. Indeed, for many younger elderly supporters, standing up all match may not be possible. In any event, their view may be adversely affected. It's unfair to expect younger elderly supporters to exhaust themselves by standing all match. Likewise, it's unfair for a standing fan to block the view of a younger child or supporter. Unfortunately, though where large pockets of our support are standing, it's difficult for individual supporters to do anything about it. Rail seating is often misconstrued as a model that will benefit those who want to stand up all match. This is not the case. Rail seating is a model that will benefit supporters of all ages by giving them the option to stand or sit and enjoy the match without hindrance. Other positive effects of rail seating are often discussed, such as improved atmosphere, cheaper tickets, groups of like-minded supporters being together in the ground, and an improved presence of young support. Whilst all of these factors may result from a rail seating model, they are not as of paramount importance to the two discussed above, safety and choice. These are the two overriding factors that will be improved should rail seating be implemented. Thank you for listening and for your time. Spine Cop 1906. Can I have a show of hands for anybody else who wants to say anything?
It's Ian Byrne, SOS Management Committee. I'd just like to congratulate the Spirit of Shankly on what you've done with this. I think it's been a very brave move by everyone, and I think it's been a really dignified debate. I was there Tuesday, been there here today, and it's been really good. I think it's the way forward. The debate's got to start, and I'm delighted. I'd just like to make a comment on what the lads from the year 1906 said. And I mentioned this on Tuesday. It was a perfect case study of the importance, I think, that this debate needs to be had. It was last year at the Man United game. So I've got my lad next to me, Jamie, who's 11 in the COP. And I've got Bob next to me, who's 90, who's been a season ticket holder for 80 years. It was comical, but it was quite sad as well, because obviously when Liverpool were attacking, the COP was up, the atmosphere was up. I'm trying to keep a grip of Jamie to stop him going 4 rows down, because he's only little. But also I've got Bob, who's 90. I'm trying to give him an hand up, because as everyone's up, he's getting up dead slow. And then obviously he's standing up, then everyone's sitting down. It was like you could play Benny Hill music. So at the end of it, I said to Bob, I said, look, mate, I said, I think we need to have a discussion with Liverpool. I think we need to maybe get you a more suitable place for you to sit. And Bob's response to me was, look, lads, he said, I've been here for 80 years. He said, I want to say, I'm a copite, I'll always be a copite. So for me, it was that game encapsulated everything what we're talking about. It's safety of fans, which has always got to be paramount, but also choice. Bob should be allowed to sit in the Kop where he can actually see the game, because what happened then after that game, I sit on the ends, and for anyone that knows me, I've got the weakest bladder in the world. It's perfect spec for me. I can just go to the toilet. So in the end, I had to move like 6 seats along and let Bob go on the end, so at least he can see some vestige of the game. I said, so it's just not perfect. It's wrong. So I think for me, and I was at Hillsborough as a 16-year-old, I'd like to, like, it's really difficult, but just take that side out of it. And as Steve Wright said, let's look forward. Let's try and look forward to, like, ensuring that the safety of our fans is paramount, which it always should be. So let's look at that aspect. Let's open the debate about rail seating. Is this the way we should go forward for future generations of fans? And I, my son, who's 11, I'd love him to be able to go to the game with his mates like I did when I was younger. But also for the likes of Bob, and we're all getting older, and give us a choice where potentially we could stay on the Kop and we could actually watch the game where you're not up and down, and I think that's where we've got to go. I think this debate should be about choice and safety of the fans, and for me it's nothing else.
I just want to follow on from the statement from Spy Kop. As a member of Spy Kop and someone who stood on the Celtic's standing area, it's from anyone who stood in it, I don't know anyone who's come away and said, like, it's not the way forward. For me, it's the future. People who've gone to Celtic, who've gone to Germany, I haven't heard a single person who's come away from it saying it's not the way forward. If you're looking at the diagram before, you got one person to one seat, the exact same as in the seating arrangements. So there's going to be no difference in exiting the stadium type thing. There's going to be no safety concerns there. You got the bar to stop your staging forward. But apart from that, nothing else is different really. So I can't see no argument against that. Anyone who experiences it for themselves, I think they should before they make an opinion on it. And what I think is getting missed from some of the comments is we're talking about choice. A lot of people are saying we're talking as if we'll go on the whole stadium standing. It's not. We're talking about a small section. So if someone who wants to sit, that's fine. Someone who wants to stand should be able to stand. Why should someone who wants to sit be able to sit and someone who wants to stand can't stand? It's about choice. We're talking about a tiny proportion of the stadium that we're going to change, and it's going to make it safer. These people want to stand. We've seen it at Liverpool matches. They're going to stand, and they're going to stand unsafely until something gets changed. So that's my opinion on it.
I just want to speak as a fan and for the fans that, yeah, there is a choice there. There should be a choice between what is right and what's wrong. And I also want to bring up the fact that if we change this for the future and create this atmosphere that we're all talking about that we want, Celtic won the title this season. Obviously, as a Liverpool fan, we want to win the title of the Premier League. We want to go back to the glory days. Would that be a kind of a major effect that this could have on supporters? And that's obviously a dream that we all want together, to share together. Obviously, another similarity is the "You Never Walk Alone" between Celtic and Liverpool. Borussia Dortmund, we all share that anthem between us. Can we be the leaders in going forward in terms of not just for us three clubs, but also for the future of football in general, and to make it safe, to make it enjoyable again, and to put the power back into the fans instead of the Premier League, who's just, obviously, it's just about money. So,
just the lad was saying there, in terms of our overall capacity, it's 5% of the total stadium, so we've got a 60,000 capacity. Standing area is only 3,000, so it's only 5% of the overall capacity, which means we do have choice for people that do want to stand, but the vast majority is there for people that want to sit. And I think that that's a big selling point for us as well, is the fact that we do offer that choice. One of the other points that I would probably make as well, that it was a pilot for us over the course of last season, but it's no longer a pilot now. It's permanently installed at Celtic Park, and we would expect it to be a permanent fixture, going forward. So it's just a couple of points.
Thanks a lot. I know there's a couple of people who have spoke already. I'm going to read a couple more out and then I'll come to people. I know there's two gentlemen over there who've indicated. Paul Bigley It's not often he gets to Anfield anymore since moving to Glasgow, but has had the pleasure of experiencing the rail seating at Parkhead. It does offer a better atmosphere in the stadium, makes the whole game more enjoyable for all ages. He's only ever experienced all-seater stadium in England since he was born, so can't come what it was like previously, but rail seats are safe, and despite a number of people thinking it, they're not crowded at all and do help improve. Tony Jobson, his 2 sons and the 2 friends and himself were all in the Leppens Lane end at Hillsborough. We mustn't forget this. I would like for all concerned to please consider why the changes were introduced and what these changes have achieved over the years, and not to change things for the sake of short-term personal gratification. David Robertshaw really hopes that the initiative will be acted upon. Doesn't see how anybody could argue against it. We stand for the majority of European games and obviously big domestic league games already, he says. We stand up for the entirety of the game. Surely it's safer to have a seat and standing area specifically made for this purpose, and give people that choice, which is an important thing that's come through. A few of the comments, which one is specifically to Rick. Obviously you've examined various forms of rail seating, we'll assume, and have you got any reason to think that there is anything in the proposed rail seating that is unsafe, and how you would compare this to the current situation where people are standing in normal seated areas, because that was one of the comments made regarding persistent standing. And another question, I'll leave that one in a second for you, Rick, without bombarding you. Obviously it's a very Declan Sloan, obviously it's a very sensitive subject for supporters, but one we should be having a debate about, and this question's particularly for John Paul. Have there been any issues safety-wise with the rail seating installation at Parkhead, or any other venues that you know of?
I remember being in the Kop where if Roger unscored, you ended up 30 yards away from where you stood and spent the next 5 minutes trying to get back to where you were. 8 years ago, I moved to the lower centenary. As far as I'm concerned, the Kop should be for the young. Make it all safe standing. There's plenty of room in that ground for us, the older ones, who want to sit and watch the game.
Ralph Quigley, Spirit of Shankly member. I think it's great that we've had the debate today. I personally haven't made my mind up over this yet. I have the greatest respect for those in the Hillsborough families who are against the idea of standing again. I need to know more about this type of rail seating, and I'm pleased that John Paul's here today to have explained a little bit more about that. But I'd like to ask a question in relation to that, and that's in relation to how tickets are allocated. Is it on a 1 seat each row, 1 person, 1 seat? Even if that is the case, is there a potential danger or risk that more, if mates want to stand together, is there a risk that they can end up more people on a row than would be safe to do so?
In terms of the rail seats, in terms of safety issues being raised as a consequence of people standing at the match, then no, there hasn't. Going back to the point that you're making there, what we did at the beginning of the season to try and make sure that we got everything right, because ultimately when you're going to do this thing, you want to get it right from the start. We engaged the services, a guy called Steve Frosdick. He works for UEFA, but he's an expert in crowd dynamics. And Steve came up and met with the members of the Green Brigade. And what they did was, they had an evening where the club weren't involved at all, but what they did was they spoke about what would be the best way to set up the rail seated area to prevent what you're speaking about. So, because everybody knows that lads will probably all try and stand together. So what we wanted to do was make sure that we had the dynamic right from the very first game that it went live. So Steve worked with the lads in terms of looking at different layouts, how they initially wanted it, pointed out where there would be problems, you know, in terms of making sure from a safety perspective they weren't going across gangways and blocking passageways, that type of thing. So what ultimately, the conclusion that they ultimately came to was that the group would be at the front of the section, and then fans who weren't part of the group would be at the rear of the section. So there's about 900 to 1,000 at the front that all form part of pretty much the Green Brigade section, if you like. whereby they would allocate the spaces to make sure that everybody was with their mates, and they would lay it out in such a way that it would prevent the movement during the game of people trying to get next to it. And that's, again, we would recommend that would be the best way of doing it, because that worked really, really well for us last season. And as I say, we did get a high level of compliance, certainly with the fans at the back, because that's mostly the family groups and the guys going with their dads and whatever else, going with their mates that don't want to be part of the ultras, part of the front. They would just naturally go to the area that they've been assigned. But because all the boys at the front all had their places and they were all already with their mates, it avoided all that problem as well. So again, you know, we would be happy in terms of consultation if any club was introducing rail seatings as to how we did it, because we think that we pretty much got it right.
Yeah, there was a question there about persistent standing and standing in seated areas, and I think we've heard today that there are inherent risks with people standing in seated areas with your trip hazards and the possibility of progressive crowd collapse. So Celtic introduced this as a control measure against persistent standing. So it was a real safety revolution that the council accepted the fact that they have persistent standing. They were going to reduce the capacity, and this was the control measure. So, and we would agree with Celtic and the local authority at Glasgow that this is a good control measure, and it is certainly safer than persistently standing.
Thanks. On persistent standing, Steve Frostick was also involved at Cardiff City that I mentioned earlier, and I know one of the results of their standing area is that persistent standing has then been reduced in other areas around the ground, which has meant less conflict between the stewards and fans when coming to sit down. I don't know if that's the case at your stadium, so that's another benefit then of rail seating. It just naturally reduces persistent standing elsewhere. Also, you know, we all know that among the standers will be people that want to sit down but are standing because they have no choice. And just to say that is one of our primary motivations for our campaign, inclusivity. We fully recognise that persistent standing does mean that people can't see. So the sooner that we have rail seating areas introduced, that means that people can watch the game exactly how they choose and in comfort too.
Thanks a lot. I will come to a few others. I'm just going to read a couple more comments out. John Duffy, he attended the meeting on Tuesday night. He thought it was positive and respectful, and talked obviously about his experience as a supporter, and talked obviously about the COP had come down in capacity over time anyway, from its 28,000 capacity down to 16,000. The point he was trying to make was that safety measures had been introduced, and extra crash barriers were actually installed, and that was safe. On a personal level, he found entering, watching and leaving the game a much safer environment once that was done. So he was saying that it's about the safety things you put in place regardless of whether it's terracing or a rail seating model. One of the things he does touch upon, he said he personally would welcome the trial of rail seating at Anfield and other grounds and be given the chance to experience it. One long-time Liverpool supporter said to him, "We've been emotionally blackmailed into not talking about standing at games after Hillsborough." And after thinking about these comments, he thinks it's time to talk about rail seating. A question for Rick was someone's experience, which again has been touched upon lots of times, but someone was at the Man City game last New Year's Eve, a fan behind in the upper main stand. I think this might have been John Milburn who was telling us before, fell 2 rows forward into the seat, split his nose open. Given the height of the stand, obviously it took a while to attract stewards. In steep stands or in the likes of the Cop where fans stand, there is the risk of fans falling, being nudged, and without the protection of a rail, serious injuries can occur. Keen to know your view, Rick, on whether rail seating does reduce these risks, which I think you probably already mentioned anyway, and whether there are stats on injuries to fans in all-seater stadia versus rail seating stadia. A comment from Catherine Hayden. She's been attending football matches on the Cop since 1982, travelling to many an away game, both seating and standing. Obviously now there's no choice to the allocated seats, but she continues to stand on the Cop and at away games. She never injured herself on standing terraces, but in seat areas there have been injuries from falling over seat backs, people behind falling on top of her, grazes and bruising and so on and so forth. Standing did not cause the awful offence of Hillsborough, and we know that's been proven. Maybe if allocated seating had been in place, the awful deaths, injuries and trauma may not have happened, but would have having seats prevented the gates being opened, and the seats have resulted in stewards or police being able to control the numbers. Maybe we'll never know. It's not possible to compare then and now, as everything to do with football has become safer, and in my opinion, political motives of Thatcher more gentrified, but I'm certain that having an allocated rail seat in a dedicated area, it would be safe and would allow fans to enjoy football as we want. It's well documented and evidence around singing atmosphere is better when fans stand, as can be seen in Anfield. She's not naive enough to think that there could ever be a return to Old Terrace, and she doesn't really think many of us want it, or it should be allowed. But she thinks that, or she wants in-seated areas for it to be safe to stand up in, something which is inevitable when attacks in full flow.
Atmosphere. Our atmosphere doesn't come. I've asked this question to umpteen people. I don't know how many people have asked. Why do you want to stand? And the first thing they say is, there's more atmosphere. That atmosphere, that's a fallacy. The atmosphere comes from that pitch. If there's nothing happening on that pitch, there's no atmosphere. You go to a boxing tournament, you get two lads fanning around or touching one another, there's nothing, you can hear a pin drop. Right, you agree with me? So that's a fallacy about atmosphere standing up. What is true about you standing up, you can shout and bawl, but you hide. When you're sitting down, you can do the same thing, but you're highlighted. And everyone can see you. And you go, look at that soft sod. But when you're in the crowd and you're standing up, you hide. And what the fellow here said about age, age doesn't come into it, as far as I'm concerned. I want to sit down, I want to see every corner of that pitch. I want to see every movement on that pitch, every little niggle, every little trip. I want to see all of it, and I can't see it if I'm standing. I've got a fella about 4 or 5 inches bigger than me in front and to the side and to the left. The only way I can see it if I sit down and watch. And that's the only way you can watch a game of football. You don't go there to mess around. You want to see a game of football. And I want to see every bit of that pitch.
I did try to answer the question about why people stand, and I know many people have. And I don't want to be facetious, but maybe I should address it when I'm talking to this gentleman directly, given that he obviously didn't hear what we said earlier. But people stand at football games for many, many reasons, and the same reasons that we did way back before Hillsborough happened was the camaraderie. It wasn't for messing around, it was for being able to sing. It was just a feeling of community that you do not get when you're sitting down. And when you say that people can pick you out for saying things, that is the exact inhibiting factor that stops an atmosphere. When people want to give an opinion or want to start a song or whatever, sitting down is inhibiting. And that will always be the case, I believe. But my major point to sort of towards the end of this, as this comes to a close, as it did on Tuesday, is that I don't know if I misheard what Amanda said, but she seemed to say that whether we wanted to take a lead on this or not, it would be down to individual club supporters groups to do as they see fit. But in the same vein of the conversation we had to do with the Hillsborough Family Support Group, if we don't take along the views of the Hillsborough Family Support Group, and by the way, they don't represent all the views of families. I know that point was made on Tuesday. But if you don't take along their views, if you don't carry them along with this debate, if you don't carry this club along with the debate and the vote that takes place, I think you've got no chance of putting this through. And if you ever did, and it went wrong, which was alluded to earlier, you would never get the chance to do this again. So if you're going to do this, it's got to be done properly now.
Sorry, I wasn't going to speak today because I spoke on Tuesday, but listening again to other people's views again today, can I just make one thing clear? There's not just the Hillsborough Family Support Group, their opinions to take into consideration. There's also families which belong into the Hillsborough Justice Campaign, which I think their opinions are vitally important, you know, as well to take into this. Also, I'm a survivor myself, which, you know, hate going on about, but Pen 3 survivor, critically injured, life support machine, last rites, ended up still permanently with a brain injury. Season ticket holder, go to whatever games I can do nowadays. I sit down, obviously. The people who sit in front of me can be taller, so they're blocking my view anyway. You know, I've got people standing on seats around me who are coming over the top. Myself, choice. It's down to choice. If you want to sit at the match, mate, you choose a seat. I think, you know, safe standing, it's a choice. If you want to stand up, choose safe standing. If you want a seat, choose a seat. I think it comes down to choice. Safety is paramount, but also I'm fed up to the back teeth of hearing Hillsborough family support groups' opinions. It's not just them, and that's no discredit. I've got many friends who I love who are in that group, so please don't think I'm just being, you know, but it really, really riles me when I hear people just going banging on about the one groups and their opinion. And this is as well where Liverpool Football Club have also got a lot to think about here, because they don't listen to anybody else's opinions when it comes to anything to do with what happened on that day and what's happened since. I'm sorry, but I'm like, you know, as I said, I wasn't going to speak today, but anyway, that's my input.
You made a point with JP about that it was Glasgow Council who come in and put the safe standing in place as a reaction to people currently standing. Is there ever any discussion in terms of that in England? Because obviously at the back of the cop, we constantly stand anyway. Is there ever been in touch where clubs are saying, well, they stand, it's a blind eye that's turned to it. Do you know we all stand at the back and that's what we all want to do? Has that conversation ever taken place to say, well, why don't we give them a chance for that? And the other one, it was the fellow used to be a steward, I don't know whether you still are. He was saying about the cop in terms of space in the rows and stuff. You mentioned earlier on saying it had to be 800 mil. Is there that room already currently to just swap already into it, or would there have to be major construction work in these grounds to get them in place?
When you retrofit it, as I said before, if you're having one for one, that would meet the standards. But if you wanted more than one person per seat, then it really would need new construction to start thinking about having a deeper bleacher. The question with regard to persistent standing, and Amanda mentioned before the Cardiff situation, we work very closely with all local authorities who set those standards, who actually issue the certificates. The Cardiff situation, the Safety Advisory Group don't condone that standing area. They're still monitoring it, so it's still not. They've still not got the green light on it, but they're continually monitoring it. And I think they're looking at injury stats and various things like that. So that's the situation with Cardiff. It is a massive issue nationally, and how do you make at Liverpool, for instance, at the back of the court, how do you make 10,000 people sit down? It's just physically impossible. So it's a real issue, it's a real situation, and we've produced guidance for clubs to look at how they can alleviate this issue. So we are very mindful that the product that Celtic have done, that's a control measure, and it's worked very effectively. But at the end of the day, as I said before, it will take a ministerial decision. So at the moment, we're piloting these areas. If Shrewsbury do it, they're not under the all-seater condition, so they could put it in without any restrictions. So again, that would be another pilot, and that would be in the UK. So I suppose it's just watch this space to the answer to that.
Yeah, it's really just a thanks for me, to get the opportunity to come along today. I'm obviously aware of the sensitivities around the debate, but I wanted to be here today to just give you the benefit of our experience at Celtic. Ultimately, I kind of hope that would help shape in terms of your own opinions, and it's for you to decide. But as I say, I just want to thank you for the opportunity, and it goes without saying, but you're all very welcome at Celtic anytime you want to come up and see it. Thank you.
Just to thank Jay very much for inviting me and for all the contributions from the floor, some of which have really given me some food for thought, and it was considerably moving to hear the experiences of those who were actually Hillsborough, and it must have taken a lot for you to come and speak out about that, so thank you.
Yeah, I would like to thank all of you for coming, and for making a very brave decision to share your personal experiences. We are humbled as a supporters union that you felt able in an environment we've set up to do that, but we do think it was important, and we hope you do understand why it was important that all voices were heard. I think a point's being made regarding who is or isn't consulted on these kind of things, and it's always been our view that all supporters should have a voice within this. I think it was noted by many who were at the closed meeting on Tuesday evening that they would welcome from the club the opportunity to have their say, even people who aren't in either of the respective Hillsborough groups, but people who would just at Hillsborough who might have something important to contribute and feel that their voice should be heard, even if they don't want to go further with that. And I think that's something the football club should be encouraged to do so, taken forward. Thank you to the panellists, Amanda, Rick and JP. It's been important that we've heard those voices and answered those questions. There is very much for us to say, other than to ask people to vote. I would just remind people to, encourage friends and family to take part in that vote. I think there's lots of things that would have to follow, dependent on any result, whether in favour or not, or whether, as Damien's put forward, wanting to know more. We do hope people feel comfortable enough and feel they're informed enough to make a decision. I certainly am a lot more informed. The union will adopt the vote of its members, as I say, on the 31st of July, and we'll make those that known. But clearly there are lots of issues within this that have come up repeatedly. Choice, safety, management, arguments that are being made on both sides, points that are being raised and questions asked. Please do consider them all. Please do make an informed decision. And thank you again for coming.